got married about 2 years before starting Benchmark, after a very short courtship. First marriage for both of us. And starting on the wedding night, it was clear there was not a great connection between us. But without her objection, I was able to throw myself into building Benchmark. And we were able to achieve some good success right from the beginning. We were able to acquire and develop our portfolio. We were able to become a market leader in New England by property count and other measures. And we were able to achieve some good, solid results for each of our institutional investment partners that we worked with. Today, we are 62 communities in 8 states. We're roughly $2.5 billion value portfolio, $500 million in revenue, 6,500 associates, and have been consistently recognized by various publications as being a great place to work. In 2009, actually I should say we also went through all the typical things with startup companies in the early days of sleepless nights of how I was going to be payroll and all the rest, which is perhaps another NIC talk. But in 2009, I was having one of those reflective life moments where I was looking back on the many blessings I had. This is 12 years after starting the company. I had 2 young daughters then, and was blessed with many material gifts from the successes of Benchmark. And realized, though, that I still was not happy in life because I had not really confronted the elephant in my room, which was my unhappy marriage. So I initiated what turned out to be 2 years of failed couples therapy. It's hard to have successful couples therapy when both of you aren't on board with who the therapists are and what you're trying to do and all the rest. At the end of that process, I initiated what turned out to be a very ugly divorce. That divorce process for me was totally emotionally draining. And unfortunately, the legal process itself took a full 5 years. During that time, I decided to step back a bit. I frankly needed to step back a bit from the day-to-day operations of the company. I delegated more. I changed the reporting structure of the company, so fewer of the senior executives reported to me. I didn't leave or anything, but I was just sort of less involved, less present, less engaged. For a while, that arrangement worked fine, and we were still achieving good business results. And then after a little while, our business results started to turn down. We were in New England, which most folks, including me, have always described as a difficult or a high barrier to entry market. Well, given the number of new competitive properties that opened there between 2014 and 2017-18, I no longer describe it that way. We'd been accustomed to operating at 93% occupancy and a 10 to 12% price premium over our competitors. We were heading to 88% occupancy at about market average pricing. Obviously a huge drop, and that was territory we'd never been in before, we're not familiar with. We'd always been sort of a star performer for our investors. Well, as I watched this happen, I saw that the company that I'd built and the culture that I and others had built was sort of losing its soul. The culture was changing. People were blaming each other. People were acting like victims, as though the competitors were doing this to us and we bore no responsibility for defending our position as market leader. There was talk of fear in the culture. And this was not the Benchmark that I'd built or the culture that I was proud of, or a company, frankly, that I wanted to be part of. This was not okay. Well, a little bit later, the divorce process was winding down, and I felt sort of that was being a little bit less of a distraction. And having lived through a marriage that was without connection, I should say, by the way, during the divorce process, I forgot an important point. one of my daughters didn't speak to me for 18 months. And that was totally devastating. And having temporarily lost connection with one of my daughters, and now looking at my company that had lost its connection with its culture and so on, I knew I needed to, and I had the energy to sort of reinstate myself completely. And I knew that the way that needed to happen was not by setting new goals or setting a new objective, but it really had to start at the core of who we were. It had to be really from the heart and the inside of what the company was all about. And so I thought about what that needed to be. And we had, in our history, over our 3-year history, 2 purpose statements in the past. The first one, for roughly the first 10 years, was creatively improving the experience of aging. Nice phrase. I'm not sure it says a whole lot, but it was nice. And roughly for the next 8 or 9 years, our purpose statement was to build a great company providing world-class senior living experiences. That's more of a mouthful, and we never really were terribly specific about what we thought world-class senior living experiences were, so I'm not sure it really added much value. And I'm a big fan of Jim Collins, and I've read most of his books. And Jim Collins, of course, makes the argument that great organizations have great purpose statements that are motivational, and they're galvanizing, and they provide clarity. Well, I think I was 0 for 2, and I decided as the company owner that my first move here was going to be, I was going to declare the new purpose, but I was going to do this myself. I wasn't going to have this be a participative process. I wanted to own this myself. And so I reflected on further about what Jim Collins says great purpose statements needed to be. He described 3 criteria. First, they needed to be short, pithy, and memorable so that everybody could remember them. Secondly, they needed to not talk necessarily about the business that you're in today, but rather about a larger cause or a mission or a bigger transcendent idea. And thirdly, they needed to really, in a way, give direction to everybody about what they're supposed to do when they show up to work every day. A great example of a purpose statement that does all 3 is Disney's to make people happy. My 2 previous purpose statements didn't do that. So I reflected on what the letters were that I've gotten over the many years of Benchmark, and we've gotten many, and it's funny how I reflected that nobody's ever written me a letter thanking me for the beautiful buildings we built, or the great food we've provided, or the great activities, or the great care, or the fact that we got the bills right, or the buildings were clean, or any of those things. That's, of course, the table stakes. That's what people expect. That's what they pay for. But there was a common theme that everybody, all the letters from our really delighted customers, what they wrote to me, complimenting us about, was the connection they made with our staff, or perhaps the connection that our staff helped them make with a family member that they'd lost touch with, or perhaps the connection they made within themselves about a lost passion. But it was always about a deep, rich, interpersonal connection. And so I decided that our new purpose statement was going to be elevating human connection. And to me, that met the 3 criteria that Jim Collins spoke about. I decided with that in hand, I was sort of ready to reassert my leadership. And so I did that in a very public way. I immediately convened some town hall meetings. And the first thing I did was I apologized to people for letting the culture get to where it got. Secondly, I said that it's not okay that we act as victims and that we had to put some kick-ass back in Benchmark. And thirdly, I unveiled this new purpose statement, and I watched people's eyes light up. And it sort of took off throughout the company. I saw people then, after those meetings, using it in emails and talking about it with excitement, and it sort of just took on a life of its own. The next thing we did was to refresh our values. We'd had a values statement for almost the 20-year history of the company based on the word personal, where each letter in the word personal stood for a value. Almost everybody in the company could tell you the word personal, but not everybody could recite all 8 values because 8 is too many. But that had worked okay for a while. But so what we did was we asked each of our associates to submit through a various process what they thought the values were of the company now. What's in the DNA of the company today, not what they thought it should be. And then we sort of lined those up with these, and there was remarkable consistency. But we boiled them down to 3 values that are our new values. And the first one is called to care, that we want to hire people and bring people in for whom it's not a job, but for whom this is a calling, for whom they feel this is their mission to be in the elder care business. The second new value is better together, that we want folks who aren't solo players, but who are team players, who are going to have each other's back, who want to be part of a team, and who understand that's the way our culture is. And third is be the benchmark, and that we want people who want to be part of a company that is striving to be the best, that's in continual improvement mode. And so if you want to go to a place where it's never going to change and it's very predictable, we're not the right place. If you want to go to a place where there's going to be change because we're constantly trying to improve, then that's what benchmark is. And these values we've rolled out, and again, they're easy to remember, they're simple, they're clear, and again, they sort of have taken hold with great enthusiasm. So with the word got out about the new values statement, about the new purpose statement, all of a sudden, immediately what happened was we started getting people who had left the company. In the first 12 months after these changes, over 350 people who had left Benchmark came back. Our business results almost immediately started going up, and they've been going up consistently since. People have been coming back even after the first 12 months, have been continuing to come back. The word got out that sort of the Benchmark culture was back. So it had a really dramatic turnaround. So I'm also somebody who thinks about where things are going in the future. And I think a lot about the impact of the boomers, which we've heard some of the previous talks talk about. And I'm of the view that the boomers, of course, have turned everything on its head that they've touched in the past. And I believe that they're going to find a lot of the senior living inventory of today probably not places they want to be. They're going to want something different. We've also talked a lot about technology and how technology will allow people to stay at home longer, and it will also allow healthcare to be delivered in more non-healthcare settings in the future. To me, the notion of elevating human connection is, I think it's a disruptive strategy and purpose. I think it's the kind of thing that Jim Collins was challenging leaders to help point their company compass towards, because it gives us the ability to think about things that allow us to provide experiences and environments and so on that align with people's purpose. So by the way, thank you, Dr. Boyle, for a perfect setup. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to we now think of ourselves, by the way, we're no longer think of ourselves as a senior living operating company. I believe that's a blockbuster strategy in a Netflix world. We think that's a thing of the past. Instead, what we are is we're now a human connection company. So we're changing exactly how we think about what we are. So I think a senior living operating company is going to be a dormant strategy that's not going to get us someplace. We're now moving to become a human connection company. And that is not just a goal, that's not an initiative, that's not a project, that permeates everything that we do. We are changing the purpose and the very existence of what Benchmark is. What does that mean? Well, that means that we're starting with focusing wholly on our customer and beginning with customer data. When I think about disruptors, I think about companies like Amazon and Google and Uber. Well, what are they? They're data companies, and they begin with customer data. That's how they do what they do. So we're starting with customer data, trying to understand our customers better than anybody else, and so we can target, we can put together customer profiles and target experiences and events and environments that, again, align with people's life purpose, so it's a more personalized experience. We're continuing to focus on becoming an employer of choice, maintaining our position as an employer of choice. One of the things I love about the purpose statement, Elevating Human Connection, is it not only describes how we want to be with our residents and families, but it also describes the culture we want. So the one statement applies to all of our constituencies, which I think is awesome. The other thing that we thought about is the question of what business we're in. And this is something it reminded me of an old business school case study that will be familiar to some of you about the very successful early railroad tycoons who missed out on the opportunity because they thought of themselves as being in the railroad business, not the transportation business. Or we also think about Blockbuster, who of course missed out. They dismissed Netflix when it came in as a distraction until it was too late. Or Kodak, that missed out on the digital photo movement. Conversely, we hear regularly about large companies that we're all familiar with today pronouncing that they're no longer what they used to be. Examples are IBM declaring they're no longer a manufacturing company, they're now a service company. Or Ford saying they're no longer a car company, they're now a technology company. Or CVS declaring they're no longer a pharmacy company, they're now an integrated health services company. I don't think we're immune from these sorts of changes. I think that's exactly what is going to be happening to us. So I think all of us need to be asking, what business are we in? Well, at Benchmark, we've asked that question, and we're now in the human connection business. Personally, I think that's a really exciting future and a really exciting journey, and I think some of our previous NIC talks today actually have demonstrated why. So we hope you'll ask yourselves those questions and join us on that journey. Thank you.